Tim Hegg reminds us that if indeed is that the old represents old wine that's unwanted and new, which is now that which is desirable, then that's not really the contrast that takes place, even though that's what Christian commentators are going to tell you is that's what's going on. But let's keep reading. Tim says, in both cases, the wine is essentially the same. Did you catch that? Pouring new wine into old wineskins, it's not the wine that gets switched out. It's just the wine skins that go through some changing. He says, it begins with grape juice and it becomes wine through fermentation, right? It goes from new wine. Eventually it gets fermented and becomes old wine, right? Or aged wine, which is the desirable stuff. Tim says, what is more, the old wine is preferable according to Luke. And that's the element that I didn't remember that Tim brought up, is if you go look at Matthew, at the very end, in verse 17, it says, the new wine is put into fresh wineskin, and so both are preserved. And that's where the Matthew rendering leaves off. Likewise with Mark, in verse 22, he says, no one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine has burst the skins, the wine's destroyed, and so are the skins, but new wine is for fresh wineskins. He doesn't mention anything further, doesn't elaborate. But only in Luke's rendering, if we look at verse 38, back up one verse, verse 30 says, but new wine must be put in fresh wineskins, and that's where Matthew and Mark would stop. But look what Luke says in verse 39. And no one after drinking old wine desires new, for he says the old is good. Or, again, depending on which translation you're reading, it says the old is better, because there's a difference in manuscripts. There's a different Greek word used in across the manuscript families. Not a huge difference between the word good and the word better here, so don't get all tripped up over that. The point I'm bringing up is that Luke adds this final extra detail about the parable about the wine. And I've added this, and if indeed the allegory that Christian commentaries have supplied is accurate, let's just assume for a moment, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say Christianity is right on the money, and that Jesus is actually talking about an incompatibility between the old and the new, and that the old is undesirable, and that the new is desirable, and that the old is on its way out, and that the new is on its way in. And that the old is Judaism and the way of keeping the commandments of God and following after the Torah of Moses and keeping the sacrifice, all that stuff, that whole old system. Let's just assume for a moment that Christianity is right on the money. Let's assume that the old in Yeshua's parable represents that old system that Jesus is replacing. Well, wouldn't it really be strange for Jesus to say at the very end of Luke, no one after drinking old wine, which represents Judaism and the law of Moses, desires new, which represents the New Testament, the New Covenant, and my new way of living, right? The law of Christ, etc., the new people of God. No one desires that, for he says the old is good, or the old is better. If the old is really Judaism, if the old is really the way of life as modeled by Moses, by Torah, by Old Covenant, by Old Testament, by the people of Israel, etc., then why would Jesus make a point to explain that the old is good or the old is better, right? Kind of throws a monkey wrench into the whole Christian allegory. At least I think it does. All right, let's go back to Tim. So he says the old wine is preferable according to Luke. And let's really just remind ourselves that common sense tells us that the old is better, right? Let's just drop the allegories for a split second. Common sense tells us that old wine is better. It's more desirable than new wine, right? I mean, go anywhere in the world, go into any bar, go into any liquor store and ask them, hey, do you have any wine that was just made like last night or yesterday or last week? Can I have a bottle of that? And they'll sell it to you for like, what, $5, right? It's really cheap. But ask them, do you have any like 30-year-old scotch? And they'll say, sure, we got it. And they go in the back and they bring this back out and you say, okay, you flop down a $5 bill or a $20 bill. And they're going to go, not enough money. Why? Why is the old wine more expensive? Because or old liquor, right? I said scotch. Why is the old more desirable? Because it's been aged, right? That's the common sense factor again, people. So let's let Tim continue. And let's see how much time I got. I'm right at the end here. I think, you know what? There's a lot to read here. Let's not actually continue with Tim Hegg. Let's stop right here at the top where he says, what's more, the old wine is preferable according to Luke. Let's stop right there with our study here on Judaism v. Christianity. We'll pick this up not next week. Just a reminder, next weekend is, if you look at your calendar, it says Rosh Hashanah, but if you look at your Bible, it says Yom Teruah, so the Feast of Trumpets, or Head of the Year, New Year. So we're not going to meet next week because I'm not going to ask you to come take away your time from your congregational meetings to sit and listen to my own commentary or meet with me in my live studies. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather you be with a live community if you can, if all possible. If you've got a local congregation you could attend, go ahead and do that first. So we will not meet next week, but we will pick this up again in 2 weeks. And when we do, we'll just pick up right here where we left off, where we're looking through Tim Hagg's commentary. But that'll do it for Judaism v. Christianity. Are Judaism and Christianity incompatible with one another?